Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to another episode of Feed the Beast Revelation. I've just been over here at our immersive engineering factory project trying to figure out some of the bigger details. Things like how we're going to visually offload our coal coke, what our blast furnace is going to look like, and what we're going to do with this area down here. I'm slowly putting together some ideas for all of that. Kind of thinking of going with a two-pillar design for our blast furnaces, by the way. Obviously, this isn't a great representation of it, but I think eventually that could look really cool once it's all detailed up and everything. So I've been working at that. Obviously, there's a lot more to do as well. Things like picking the block palette so this place stops looking like a jumbled mess, and just generally a lot of building and detailing, but that's not actually what we're going to be doing today. No, today we're actually going to be starting on a brand new project. And I realize that's kind of a slippery slope. Obviously, we have a long way to go with this factory project yet, and even this dam over here that we did a while ago is still completely unfinished. We have a lot of landscaping to do, we kind of want to tie this side of the mountain into the dam somehow, and I still have to sort out the water source behind it as well. The thing is, this new project that we're going to be doing, frankly, should have been done before either of these. Actually, it probably should have been done back in episode number 2 or 3. And that is to clean up this farm right here. This kind of pains me to look at, to be honest with you. So, this is the entirety of my farming setup in this series, and has been since episode number 1. I'm very ashamed right now. I think the reason that my farming situation has stayed in such a dire strait for so long is that, well, I started this series off as a lost little vanilla boy, which I very much still am one, by the way. And I got over here, and my little ADD brain just went, ooh, modded Minecraft. I get to play with Botania and Thaumcraft, and make a factory to make steel, and make a dam that generates electricity, and do all of these things that I've never gotten to do before. And the idea of farming just kind of never came up in my head, right? Because it's kind of a vanilla subject. It's something that feels vanilla. So I didn't really think about it too much, which is a shame because there's actually a lot of really, really cool ways to do farming in the mod pack. So today we're going to try and rectify that. We're going to set up the first of our farms, and we will likely probably have multiple farm structures over time because, like I said, there's a lot of cool ways to handle farming. But today we're going to go for a relatively basic, relatively straightforward one, and hopefully by the end of the episode we'll have that up and running and we can get rid of this eyesore forever. That is our main goal today, making sure that farm gets going and getting rid of this. Now, before we actually dive into making the farm setup itself, well, first we need to decide where it's going to go. And I don't want to do this haphazardly because I am actually going to put multiple farms into the building that this is going into. At least I hope to. And as a result, I don't want to try and put this farm down and then decide I need to move it later on. So, the first step here today is actually going to be to decide where this building is going to go, and then kind of putting the footprints for the building in place, at least roughly. Obviously, the building is most likely going to be changing quite a lot by the time it's done, but as long as we have generally enough space and it feels like a good location for it, we should be alright. Now, that being said, I don't exactly know how the building is going to turn out just yet, because there's going to be a lot of different variables to it. For right now, I'm just going to lay the footprint of it out, and I'm also going to do a rough front facade of it, to give you guys an idea of the style. But because it is going to be changing quite a lot, I'm not going to be adding any of the detailing, or any, super intricate building to it. It's going to be kind of basic, a little bit bland looking, so do keep that in mind and do bear with me. It will look much better by the time it's done. That being said, I'm going to go lay it out, get that front facade on, and then we're going to come back and set up the farm. So I am just placing in the last few blocks for our farming area, or what will eventually become our farming area, I suppose. Before we talk about that, though, let's head out here and take a look at this magnificent building. Obviously, it is still pretty bland overall. I did have to pull out the chisel and bits for this area because, well, obviously I couldn't convey this idea very well with full blocks, but everything else is very bland and, undetailed. I do think there's a lot of potential here, though. I think once we add in pipes and vents, and we add some slightly ornate detailing to the windows, and we make that little white square look like a clock, I think all of that stuff is going to set this apart really well, and I think the build will start coming together. Obviously, the structure itself also is a long way to go. We'll do things like add stuff to the sides so the building has a little more shape, all of that good stuff. I didn't want to do that quite yet because any modification to the front would make me have to tear down and redo the entire wall. And I would definitely have had to because I want to redo this tower and make it a little bigger. Probably a little bit more, width to it, I think would be nice so we can make it a little rounder, maybe a bit taller, and hopefully a little bit less phallic. So, yeah, I think the building has a long way to go, but it does feel like it has some good potential. And on that note, we do have kind of a happy little accident, if you want to call it that. The place where I put this ended up being floating, which obviously I knew was going to happen when I put it here, but I didn't think about what it would mean for the build itself. This is a really prime excuse to do something cool with the basement and make it open out into kind of a back area. I think this is going to lead to some really cool build stuff. So, looking forward to doing that. For the time being, though, we need to move on from the building and talk about the farm itself, because we really need to get this done today. Now, as I said earlier today, we do have a lot of options when it comes to farming. We have all kinds of blocks that can break crops for us and pick them up and plant them. We have blocks like the Drum of the Wild from Botania, which can be used to break crops. We have the Garden Cloche from Immersive Engineering, which is really cool. Lots of cool stuff that I really do want to use. But for today, we're going to go with a fairly straightforward and simple solution. One that will give us a relatively, efficient farm, so we can get any crops that we need pretty quickly. And also one that's easy to set up and easy to turn into more than just a crop farm, but also a way to generate power. So, in order to do that, I have decided on the farming station from Ender.io. Now, Ender.io as a whole is a very cool mod. There's tons of really interesting machines in it, and even interesting equipment with different properties, and I actually really would like to spend some time looking into this stuff, so maybe within the next episode or two, we may have an Ender.io episode where we play with a bunch of things. For today, though, our main focus is the farming station and reaching that. Now, the farming station is not a kind of introductory block to Ender.io. In fact, it does require a lot of components that you need to be a little ways into Ender.io to actually get. So because of that, we do need to take a few baby steps into the mod, and the first step in that is creating some simple machines. Quite literally, the simple alloy smelter and the simple sag mill are the first things we need to create. Now, as their name implies, these are indeed quite simple. In fact, they're made almost exclusively out of vanilla Minecraft components. The one exception to this is the simple machine chassis, which requires the Grains of Infinity. Thankfully, these are also relatively easy to get, however. All we need to do is go down to bedrock level and light it on fire, and then once that fire extinguishes, we have a 50% chance of getting a Grain of Infinity for ourselves. So once we've acquired those, it should be relatively easy to craft these blocks, and then we need to place them down. Now, these do require power, and that does mean that, yes, once again, we are expanding our quote-unquote temporary base. I know. So these two simple machines would technically do just fine for what we need today. They would do everything we need of them, but they're also kind of crummy. They work relatively slowly, and more importantly, they constantly drain power. Not very much, mind you, but it still bothers me. So we're actually going to go ahead and upgrade these two blocks. Now, the sag mill and alloy smelter have 3 different tiers in Ender.io. There is the simple version, the normal version, and the enhanced. And we could go all the way up to the enhanced easy enough, but we don't really need to today, so we'll do that some other time. For right now, we're just going to go with the mid-tier versions. Now, there are only 2 types of materials we need to craft in order to do this. One is the industrial machine chassis, which is just a simple machine chassis combined with some industrial powder coating. And that's just some crushed quartz and lapis, along with something called organic dye, which is something you actually create in the alloy smelter itself. There's a few different recipes for it. It's all pretty straightforward. The other thing that we need to craft is something called an energized bimetal gear. In order to do these, you need to create something called energetic alloy ingots, and that is, once again, something crafted in the alloy smelter itself, rather simply using a golden ingot, redstone dust, and glowstone dust. So, once you have all of those components sorted out, you can go ahead and upgrade your simple alloy smelter or sag mill straight to the normal version, and you no longer have the annoying power drain, as well as having them run a little bit faster. And with those two machines upgraded, we are almost to the point where we can craft our farming station. We just need to craft one more machine to make one more specific component, and that machine is the slice and dice. So the slice and splice, pardon me. Anyway, the slice and splice is relatively simple. A couple new components to it. We have the Soul Machine chassis, which is pretty much the same as the ones we've seen before, just slightly different ingredients. And we also have Solarium ingots, which are just soul sand and a gold ingot and the alloy smelter. All relatively simple stuff. Let's go ahead and craft that. And we'll need to pop a couple tools into it, as well as a capacitor. Now, a lot of the machines in Ender.io use a capacitor, and there's 3 different tiers to them. So at the very lowest, you've got this simple little guy. You take 2 of those combined with some energetic alloy and pulverized coal to get the double layer, and then 2 of those double layer ones with glowstone and a new alloy called Vibrance alloy to get the octadic capacitor, which is the highest tier. This Vibrance alloy is just the energetic with ender pearls and an alloy smelter, so it's not too bad to get a hold of these. I personally would just always go for the highest tier one. So let's go ahead and pop those in, and now we need to craft what this block was made for, at least in terms of our farming station, which is the Z-Logic controller, this one right here. It takes 2 solarium ingots, 2 silicon, a redstone, and a zombie head. Pretty simple stuff. So let's go ahead and move those in, and this is going to go to work nice and quick because we have our octadic capacitor, of course. And with that, we finally have everything we need to craft the farming station. So let's go ahead and do that. If I can find it. There we go. Ah, glorious moment. So certainly, after all of that, we finally have everything we need to get this thing up and running, right? No, not quite. So the farming station is in place, and other than having no power, you might assume that it's good to go, but there's still one thing missing. So obviously we have a bunch of different inventory slots here corresponding to different things. The ones in the bottom left are for the seeds or whatever it is you want the farming station to grow for you, whether that's seeds or saplings or carrots, whatever the case may be. In our case, for right now, we're just going to load this up with regular seeds and make a wheat farm. Now the bottom right is for the output of the farm. Obviously we're just going to pull items straight out right away, so that's not a big deal. Top right is for fertilizer, whether that's bone meal or phytogrow or whatever it is you may want. Maybe at some point we'll automate that process and try and speed this farm up. We'll see. But the top left is where there's actually a problem. You see, depending on what you want the farming station to do, you need to supply it with a different tool. In our case, we need to give it a hoe. Now, the hoe for the farming station is used for more than just tilling the ground. Obviously, we don't really need it for that because we are using fertile soil from Rustic, which is a very, very cool block. It's essentially permanent farmland that can't be trampled, is always hydrated, and you could even plant sugarcane on it without an adjacent water source. So, really cool, really useful block. But that does mean that we don't actually need the ground to be tilled. However, the farming station also uses the hoe to break the crops. And it won't break any crops at all if it doesn't have one. The issue here is that it actually uses durability each time it does that. So obviously any hoe you put in there is just going to break eventually. Now there's 2 solutions to this problem. You can either create a system that automatically builds hoes and filters them into the system as it needs them, which honestly isn't as hard as it sounds, or you can just make a tool that will never break. Now, luckily for us, we have Tinker's Construct, Tinker's Tool Leveling, and extra utilities too, making this process a whole lot easier. So the solution to this problem, at least here in this mod pack with what I have available to me, is to create a Madoc from Tinker's Construct that has 5 or more modifiers on it. Now there's a few different ways to reach this goal, but in our case, the simplest way is to create one piece using magical wood, which is just a bookshelf and a gold ingot, so long as you have extra utilities too. We need to create one other piece out of paper, and then the third piece can be anything. We're just going to do that out of paper as well for convenience. So if we assemble this Madoc, we're going to end up with one that has 6 modifiers on it. which means we can pop 5 reinforcement plates on and end up with an unbreaking tool right off the bat. Now, I will say that this is normally a terrible idea, because 1, this tool is kind of rubbish, and 2, because we used magical wood, it has the magically brittle property, which means that the tool will just spontaneously break. It doesn't matter that it's unbreakable, it doesn't matter if it has full durability, sometimes it will just randomly entirely break. However, that doesn't happen up in our farming station. It just never ends up triggering that property. So in terms of the farming station, this is just a completely unbreakable hoe that can be used forever. Pretty cool. So let's actually go ahead and pop this in there. So with that Maddock in place, our farming station is now ready to go. All we need to do is supply it with a little bit of power and also an output to take those items and put them into some kind of storage. And once we do that, the farming station will just do its thing. It'll farm this entire area for us endlessly. Now, the issue here is that, well, storing those items is fine, but I don't need 7 million seeds, which, let's be honest, this thing is going to produce. And I don't really want to trash them either. That feels a little bit wasteful to just destroy items. Thankfully, I found a really good way to make use of those seeds, and that is to generate a boatload of power. Now, in order to do that, I have set up a basic skeleton of an XNet system down here. This is going to allow us to transfer items and power and liquids, including water from our aqueous accumulator down here. You'll see why we need that momentarily. This is going to allow us to transfer those very easily. So, how is this going to work? Well, in order to turn the seeds into power, we need a block called a Bioreactor. This is from Industrial Foregoing. Very neat little block. Essentially, all we need to do is supply it with some kind of plant life, in this case, seeds. And for every 13 of those that we put in, it's going to give us 1 bucket of biofuel. Now, what do we do with that bucket of biofuel? Well, we need to put it into one of 2 different blocks. One block that works is the biofuel generator, also from Industrial Foregoing. And this one works okay. It actually generates 640,000 RF per bucket, which is pretty impressive for only taking 13 seeds. The issue is that it's relatively slow. It generates all of that RF at only 160 RF per tick, so it takes a very, very long time. Thankfully, there is another block that can do it, and that is the Enhanced Combustion Generator. There is a non-enhanced version, but, you know, go big or go home. So, this was by far the most difficult block to craft that we've done today. It took a bit. So, obviously there's certain things in here we recognize, things like the electrical steel we did before. The vibrant bimetal gear is just the vibrant alloy. But it also took pressurized fluid tanks, which were made mostly with dark steel, which took iron, coal, and obsidian. But much more importantly, it took this enhanced machine chassis. The coding for that one was a little tricky. Not too bad. It took some special version of iron and a diamond. More importantly, however, it took an end steel chassis to craft, and that requires end stone, dark steel ingots, and obsidian. The issue here is that I don't have end stone. We never actually went to the end. I didn't realize that until crafting this, but we actually have never been to the end before. So that's something we'll probably be doing within an episode or 2, because this was really annoying. I actually had to use the fluid transposer with melted down ender pearls and sandstone to craft endstone. So that's something we'll be taking care of soon. Anyway, I crafted 4 of these for the time being. There is a good chance that we may need more of them later on, but we'll see. And of course, I also made some octadic capacitors for them. Now, all we have to do is send the seeds into the bioreactors and the biofuel from that over to our combustion generator, along with a bit of water from our aqueous accumulator, and these are going to generate 750,000 RF per bucket, and it's going to do it at 375 RF per tick. That means that once all 4 of these are going, we're going to be getting 13 to 1400 RF per tick, in addition to powering this entire farm system and keeping it self-sufficient. So this is going to work out really well, I think. Now, obviously, we also need a storage system. We need somewhere to store the wheat, which is going to go through. And we also need to be able to save any seeds that get passed by that aren't kind of caught by the bioreactors. Because these will get filled up, I'm pretty sure. I do think we're going to have some slight excess when it comes to seeds. If we have too many, I can always pop another bioreactor down. But I think it's going to be just a little bit too much to get caught in all of these. So we're going to want that. We'll see how many actually get through, as well as one for wheat. And obviously this isn't an ideal solution. It means that I can't swap this farm out to other crop types. I'm actually going to pop down a chest just in case I forget about that and do swap it out with something different. That way this chest can catch, some items for at least a little while. But eventually what we'll do is come down here and swap this out with an input to a better storage system. The only reason that I'm not having these filter directly into our current storage system, which I could do very easily, is that our current storage system is actually really, really limited. I'm constantly kind of like running low on space, and we really need to upgrade to something better. Something like refined storage or applied energistics, and we'll hopefully be doing that in the near future. For today, though, we're just going to get by with this. Now, the last thing that we need is a power area, so we can kind of output the power and store it somewhere. This energy cell is going to act as a buffer, and then we have the power cell, which is going to connect to our wireless network that we use to power everything that requires it. So this should work relatively well for us for the time being. Now all I need to do is set up our XNet controller here. So assuming I have configured all of this stuff correctly, our system should be good to go now. All we need to do is give it a little bit of a jump start with some power, and we can do that using our power cell. So let's pop that down. Let's set this to extract power. And once we set this to output, it should start powering all of our machines, including our farm itself, which is obviously starting to plant already. So this is good. At this point, I'm pretty sure this should all be up and running. Obviously, I'll let this kind of go for a little bit, let the power station, or the power reserves in our farming station, rather, build up just a little to make sure that it's got enough. That should be good. Now we can go ahead and take this back and put it back into our spot here. I'll set that up again, but I'm going to go ahead and let this farm run for a little bit and make sure that it's actually going to, kind of function properly. Make sure that the seeds go where they need to and that the generators eventually kick on. And once all of that starts happening, well, I'll come back with you guys and show you the result. But while I'm waiting for that to happen, there is one other thing that I want to try and sneak in here. So our farm is up and running at full force now, and the amount of power we're generating kind of reflects that. We're up over 20 million RF already, and in that time we've also generated over 1,000 wheat. Obviously this system is going to get backed up very, very quickly. We actually really need to sort out some kind of big central power system for our base area, some kind of multi-billion RF level storage system. That way we can pump all of this RF into that, and then draw from that when we need power for certain machines. Because right now we're just pushing straight into a little power cell network that only has 9 million RF capacity. It's not quite enough. So we'll have to sort that out sometime. We'll also try and sort something out to do with all of this wheat, because this is actually generating a little bit faster than I thought it was going to. I think there's a few things we could do. We could make something that would automatically generate certain food items out of that, which is something I do really want to do. We could also automatically turn it into emeralds, I believe. There's a way that you can automate villager trading, so that might be kind of cool. We'll worry about that another time. First, let me show you the other thing that I added to the farm, and that is this little lever. Now, eventually, this will be replaced by some kind of automated circuit, either a timer that goes off at a specific time of day, or, something that triggers when we walk in the building. I'm not entirely sure just yet. You may have gotten a little preview there. But it is a sprinkler system. I really liked the idea of having some kind of visual sprinkling going on, some kind of watering of the plants. Now, there was only 3 ways I could think of to do this, and the other 2 had major flaws, or at least one of them did, and the other was just kind of lame. So this was the best way I could come up with to do it. These are sprinklers from Gadgetry. And I don't know, I think it looks kind of cool. Obviously, we spend half the time just watering the ground rather than the plants, but, I think it's okay. I think once we add detailing in here, like once we cover up the sides of the dirt and we can make the floor look a little wet and have drains and stuff on it, I think that'll start looking really cool. So, I think that's going to do it for our farm area, the new one, at least. There is one very important thing we need to do, though. Ah, that feels so much better. It's like when you have a room that gets a little bit too messy and then you clean it up. It just feels so good. Obviously, we still have a lot of other random stuff strewn around that we need to kind of clean up, and we do still have the animals as well. Those are definitely going to be an interesting one to try and solve, given the theme of the buildings we're going with in this area. But I'm sure we'll figure something out. Though, before we start adding even more buildings, we really need to get on improving the ones we have so far, especially the factory and the new farm building. Those are looking pretty lacking at the moment. I think they'll be good once we add the detailing and figure all the block pallets out and stuff, but, yeesh, not great right now. So, we have a lot of stuff to figure out, but alas, that is going to have to wait until next time, because, well, I think I'm going to call it here for today. So, as always, if you have any suggestions about the stuff we did today, things like how to improve our farm or what else we can put into this building, or how to improve the building itself, of course, then be sure to let me know. But, hello, lag spike. But for right now, I'm going to call it here. So, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you had a good time, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.